Dirty Objects is the 23rd episode of the first series, based on the story of the same name from the Railway series book Toby the Tram Engine. This once again has James as a main character who over the years has become one of the fan favourites, and it's the first time he's had a main role in the series since the Troublesome Engine saga. But is it as good as we remember? Let's have a look. Toby and Henrietta are enjoying their new lives on the island of Sodor, but because of their paintwork and old-fashioned appearances, James often mocks them and calls them dirty objects. One day, Toby asks why James is red, and James says it's because he is a splendid engine who is never dirty. Toby then teases James by reminding him of the time he needed bootlaces to mend a hole in his coaches, much to James's anger. Later, at the end of the line, James leaves his coaches behind and stops at several stations to pick up trucks for a slow goods train at each station, which he despises. Despite the trucks initially behaving well, James is so rough with them that they decide to pay him back. At the top of Gordon's Hill, James should have remembered to have his brakes pinned down, given his previous accident with trucks, but he is too busy thinking about what he will say back to Toby. Seizing the opportunity, the trucks push James down the hill. Unable to stop, James flies through Marin Station and crashes into a line of tar wagons. Although James is not badly hurt, he is left completely covered in tar, while the tankers and some of his trucks are destroyed. As Percy and Toby arrive at the scene, they both tease James, pretending not to recognise him due to his dirty paint. They take James back to Tidmouth Sheds where the Fat Controller is waiting. He commends Percy and Toby for their hard work and tells James he needs to be cleaned immediately. The Fat Controller rewards Toby with a new coat of paint and accepts his request that Henrietta have one too. Toby happily runs off to tell Henrietta the good news, while James watches in silence, knowing full well that he is now the dirty object. This was a really nice and fun episode in my opinion, as we got to see James take the spotlight again. It was nice to see him take the full spotlight ever since the Troublesome Engine saga and the James trilogy, and it shows his boastful, conceited attitude, especially when he comes across Toby. I especially love this bit of dialogue from both of them.
"I am a splendid engine," answered James. "Ready for anything. You never see my paint dirty." "Oh," said Toby innocently, "that's why you once needed bootlaces, to be ready, I suppose."
It's just hilarious continuity how nobody lets James forget about his bootlaces incident. It's just great continuity in my opinion. And I love how Ringo Starr keeps delivering the line dirty whenever James says it.
Dirty trucks from dirty sidings. Blech.
That is just a brilliant performance in my opinion. This episode also marks the second time in the series we get to see an on-screen crash, with James crashing into some tar wagons. And for the 1980s, they pulled this off really well. It's one of those many instances that would show up in the future of the TV series where James gets too full of himself and then it all comes back to bite him on the ass. And that's just the thing with some people in the world. No matter how many times they learn their lesson, they never seem to lose their boastfulness from time to time. It's like when you watch the Cosgrove Hall version of The Wind in the Willows. No matter how many times Tobe learns his lesson about one of his crazes, he never seems to learn his lesson enough not to get a new craze and then get into more trouble. And that's another reason why I love James. Every time he learns his lesson after being too boastful and conceited, he never seems to learn his lesson again afterwards and he gets boastful and conceited again. And that's just part of what makes James so entertaining in my opinion. Dirty Objects has become one of my most favourite episodes over the years because of James's crash and how boastful and conceited he's been throughout the episode. And as I said, Ringo's performance with him is just superb. It's another episode that I recommend checking out if you haven't seen it for a while, especially if you're a fan of James the Red Engine. It's a fun story with another really good crash, and it's one of those crashes that's remembered throughout the years of the TV series. And the crash was so popular that they ended up redoing it for Chucklesome Trucks in the 22nd series of the TV series. But the layout in that flashback has nothing compared to the layout in the original episode. Rewatch it for yourself, enjoy James's crash, and just enjoy the all-around entertainingness of it.
Blech.